Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute a day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there friends, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio here in the Bible Bistro. Come on in here, sit down with me. Let's study God's Word together. This is your home for artisanal, organic, responsibly handled Bible study. You won't find this kind of 5-minute Bible study anywhere else on the interwebs. I promise you that. This is Daily Dose Radio. And today, all this week, we're studying Psalm 53, which is a very, very important psalm. It is said twice, basically, because we had Psalm 14 is its twin, exactly the same thing, almost exactly the same thing. And then Psalm 53. So it's emphasized by its doubling. And then we find it again in the New Testament. So we're going to talk about that today. One of the keys to this psalm is the fact that the negative appears so often in this psalm. Well, actually, we began with it, twice yesterday in verse 1. There is no God, there is none that does good. Those phrases are alike in a sense because they begin with the same Hebrew word. There is no, or there is not. There's a little Hebrew word that's translated there is not. And it begins each of those phrases. And we find it again in verse 3. We find it again there. But then we just have the negative in verse 4 twice. So it happens quite often in this particular psalm. And it's something that you want to kind of sit up and take notice of, especially when the psalm begins with these words, there is no God. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. Now, verse 1 said, corrupt are they, and have done abominable iniquity. There is none that doeth good. So is he talking just about the fool, or is he talking about everybody? Well, now we're going to continue, because there is none that doeth good is the beginning phrase of a little packet of information that we're going to get in 2 and 3. And we're going to end the same way. There is none that doeth good. Okay? So, let's look at, let's look at verse 2. God looked down from heaven upon the children of men to see if there were any that did understand, that did seek God. Every one of them has gone back. They are altogether become filthy. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. Now let me add my own translation to that, because that last phrase, no, not one, begins again with that little Hebrew word, there is not. So it's, there is none that doeth good, there is not even one. And that's the way the translation has it, or the Hebrew text says it, not even one. So it's emphatic here, okay? We began with that phrase in verse 1, there is none that doeth good. We end with that phrase, there is none that doeth good. And then David emphasizes that by saying, there is not even one. Now, you say, how does that come over in the New Testament? Well, let me just share that with you. In the New Testament, Paul is making an argument about the totality, the universality of sin. And he says this in verse 9. What then? Are we better than they? He's talking about the Jews against the Gentiles. He says, no, in no wise, for we have before proved, both Jews and Gentiles, that they are all under sin. All under sin. And then he comes here to Psalm 53, and he quotes, there is none that understands, there is none that seeks after God. They are all gone out of the way. They are together become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. So he takes this passage and he uses it in his argument to argue that everybody is under sin. We are all corrupt. We have all received that sin nature. In Adam all die, so we understand that. We've been told that here in Romans. And now Paul says it's not just that, but it's that even now in our flesh, we're struggling against a problem that is sin, all under sin. So David the psalmist says, God looked down from heaven upon the children of men. So he's not just talking about the Jews, he's talking about all the children of men. He's not just talking about the fool, he's talking about all the children of men. To see if there were any that did understand. Now here's our word maskil that's translated understand here in verse 2. To see if there were any that did understand. So what are we to understand? We're to understand that this is a problem. That God is looking, he's looking upon the children of men, and then he's going to tell us that every one of them has gone back. They are together become filthy. So this is what we need to understand. Paul is right. We are all sold under sin. There is none that doeth good. He repeats it. He said it in verse 1. He says it again here in verse 3. There is not even one. So we need to understand that. Our problem is, it's not just the fool that has this problem, but ladies and gentlemen, I think we probably could say we're all foolish in this way. Because at some point we probably all said to ourselves, oh, there's no God. Even those of us who have now come to Christ probably can confess that at some point in our life, we probably either believed that or acted that way, that there's no God. I can do whatever I want. God's not going to see. He's not going to hear. But Paul, and according to David, says, well, they're all corrupt. They've all done iniquity. There's none that seeks after God. Now this strikes at the heart of the seeker-sensitive churches, doesn't it? All these seeker-sensitive churches, they're looking to find those who are seeking God. Well, nobody's seeking God. I tell you who's seeking someone. God is seeking men to bring them to Christ. That's who's the one seeking. Men are not seeking anything. Men are like dead driftwood in a stream. They're just going along with the stream. They can't control themselves, and they're not looking for God. It's God who's looking for them. No one is seeking after God. We've all gone back. We've all become filthy. There is none that doeth good. So this is something to think about. Now tomorrow we're going to look at verse 4 and just verse 4 and consider what else David has to say about this subject. So I hope you'll join me then here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.